If you watch some of my previous videos, you'd know that I was unhappy with this section. And you can see here the piece of the fascia that I cut out. And what I wanted to do is bring the rocks further out and get rid of this piece of fascia. Now I've cut the fascia down below the benchwork height, and I've done that as far back as I think I'll go. I have my benchwork widened, and on this end here, where I want to add the additional rock castings, I've widened it 4 inches. And if you watched my tour video, part 2, you'll know that I wanted to add a small freight house in this area, but I needed to widen the benchwork, and so this is also 4 inches wider, so that small freight house should fit here. And this area of the benchwork is 2 1/4 inches wider. I bought this piece of 1-inch foam at Lowe's. Now I'm only applying the 1-inch foam from that point down to this point. So I didn't want to buy an entire 4x8 sheet. So I just bought this small sheet of 1-inch foam. And I have this corner piece, or the end piece, cut. And now I'll just cut the rest of these pieces to fill in back to this point. Cut some 4-inch wide pieces of MDF hardboard. And this is going to be my fascia for where I've widened the benchwork. Well, I have this first piece of fascia clamped into place. So I'll go ahead, put a few screws in it, and then just move down the benchwork. After drilling the holes, I then use a countersink so that the screw heads are flush with the fascia. And when the screws are tightened up, nice and flush with the fascia. I have my fascia clamped here in 3 places to put this bend in it. Now I didn't use any water or Windex or anything on the MDF hardboard. It just doesn't require it for this type of bend. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and mark it out, drill the holes, countersink the holes, and get these 2 screws in. Alright, so next I'm going to want to pull this up tight. So I'll put a screw in here, pull this up tight, and then I'll work the fascia back. Now I'll tighten up this screw and pull this fascia up tight. Now I can work it the rest of the way back. The first 2 pieces of fascia are fit, and the foam is cut to fit. I mean, there are a few gaps that'll have to be filled, but for the most part, the foam has been fit. The foam still needs to be glued down, and once I get this last piece of fascia in place, I'll glue down the foam. Alright, well I have this last piece of fascia in place, so now I can go ahead and glue in the green foam. Alright, so I'm going to put some paint on the fascia. Now this paint is supposed to be the same color as the rest of the fascia. It seems like batches of paint vary in color from one to the other. And you know, black isn't just black. There's all kinds of black. So when the layout is closer to being finished, all of the fascia will get repainted. So it'll all match. I have a coat of paint on the fascia. I have the foam glued down. And the paint on the fascia is still pretty wet. So I'm going to let this sit overnight, and I'll come out here tomorrow and see what I have. I applied a layer of spackling over the green foam to make it even with the top of the benchwork after this dries for probably overnight. I'll sand it smooth and try to get it to match up perfectly with the existing benchwork. Now that the benchwork has been widened 4 inches here, I now have room for this small freight house. And with widening the benchwork 2 1/4 inches here, I can lay in almost 6 feet of track here. And then that'll go up to a number 6 turnout up here. Now what I would like to do is add some background structures here. I would like to put in single-story structures so I can easily access the industries on the inside of the tracks. And any structures that I add here along this track, they don't necessarily have to be rail served. But I think what that'll do is by adding structures there, is it'll give the illusion of just a larger city area where industries here, background buildings here, full structures here. It'll just give this area more of an illusion of being a city. I'm getting ready to install the turnout for my 3rd track. Now I have solder joints here that connect to this number 4. So I'm going to try to desolder this and pull this track out and install the number 6 right here and then reinstall joiners. Now over here I have a gap. Now this is probably an expansion gap. And what I'm going to do is I'll just cut it back to this spot right here. And you can see there's feeders soldered here. I'll have to desolder those. I have the track removed, and I pulled the feeders down through the benchwork. And here, I got the rail joiners off the turnout. What I did is I just heated up the rail on the turnout side and then just pulled on this piece of rail to pull the joiner out. One thing that's interesting here, and I hope it doesn't cause a problem, is this isn't exactly a straight run. So you can see that it curves slightly to the left. Now I hope this isn't too much of a kink right here to cause me trouble. I don't have any solder wick to remove the solder on this rail, so what I need to do is I'm going to heat this rail up and then push the joiner on when the solder is wet. Okay. Now you can see here where these two turnouts join up that I have a gap here. And there's a slight kink right here where these two meet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of this rail off and try to close this gap up. Alright, I clipped a little bit off of this end rail here, and you can see the gaps have closed up I think I can live with that. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. Before I glue down the turnout, I'm going to want to drill with the Tortoise machine. I'll step up the bit size. I got 2 inches of foam there I got to go through. And I'm going to drill a 3/8 hole, which is a pretty big hole. But that's a long way for that rod to actuate, so I think I can go ahead and glue down the turnout now. I'm going to drill for powering the frog after I get the turnout glued in place. So I'm going to use some power grab. I'll use a track tool here to line up the ends. This end has a joiner, so I don't have to worry about it, but this end, I need to make sure it stays lined up. When widening the benchwork, I didn't get this quite flat, and so I've had to shim one side of this spur track to try to get the track level. Now this is 0.3 degrees, and I think anything within 0.5 or less is plenty good. And so that's what this stretch of track is. I have it level within 1/2 degree. And you can see where I have it pretty straight. It's on a 2-inch center. All right, so my track in this direction, lengthwise, is off by about 0.35 degrees from perfectly level. And in this spot, it is perfectly level. And in this spot, it's 0.2 degrees off of perfectly level. So that's pretty good. I'm looking at 1/2 degree either direction, side to side or lengthwise. If I can get my track within 1/2 degree, then I'm pretty happy with it. Since I have all these shims, shimming the ties up off of the adhesive, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some full-strength white glue, put it in my little pie tin there. I'm going to use a brush and brush some glue down in here to secure the track to the shims. I've applied full-strength white glue to these areas where I had the shims. And so the ties and the shims and the benchwork should all be bonded together once this dries. And my track should be pretty level. With my track gauge here, you see I have a real nice smooth transition onto the turnout. And I have my expansion gap there. What I want to do now is get ready to run the frog wire. So first thing I need to do is drill down a pilot hole here so the screw has a place to go. Alright, and now I'm going to take a 172 tap and I'm going to tap this hole. I got to be a little bit gentle here because It's not the most robust tap. So I don't want to break it. I just need to run it in deep enough where it's no longer cutting threads. So I think I'm there. So I can go ahead and take it out. I'm going to take this 12-inch long, 1/8-inch diameter drill bit. Now I'm going to drill down through the benchwork. I don't need a drill bit this long, but this is the only extended length bit I have, so it's either a standard bit or this one. Now with a bit this long, it's a little bit awkward. All right. I only need a piece of wire long enough to go from here over to here, because I'm going to hook my frog wire to my Tortoise machine. And I'm going to use 20 gauge solid core wire. I need to give myself enough wire to compensate for the depth of the benchwork and for the depth of the Tortoise machine, and I'd rather have too much than too little, so I'll cut off a couple feet and then run it down the hole. Alright, so hopefully my wire's straight enough that I can get it through the benchwork. Oh yeah. I widened the slot of this 172 screw so that it would accept this 20 gauge wire. And the 20 gauge wire will fit down inside there and give me more area to solder. All right, before I put the screw in place, I want to scrape the coating off this tab so I get a better electrical connection. All right. So now I can put the screw in place. I could have cut this screw off to make it shorter, but didn't bother. That's why I drilled the hole before putting the screw in here, so I had a hole to put the screw into. Alright, now I want to get this screw snug, but I don't want to get it so tight that I strip the threads. And now what I'll do is I'll just pull down the wire and get the wire into the slot. Now I might have to make a little bend here to get it to fit. Alright, that's a pretty good fit right there. It's down in the slot. So I'll use this old piece of rail, put a little bit of flux on the screw and the wire. Should be plenty. And I have some rosin core solder. go ahead and get this soldered up. All right, there we go. So use a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush and get rid of that flux. Flux is mildly corrosive, but even more important, paint won't stick to it, so let me get rid of it. I'm going to take some 320 grit sandpaper, sand the top of the frog so it makes good electrical contact. And now I'm going to go ahead and solder the track up here, here, and then down the track. All right. And like I did with the frog wire, come here with some isopropyl, get that flux out of there. All right, now I'm going to use a bright boy and clean up the top of the rail where I soldered. Any solder that's on the top of the rail, I want to make sure the rail's nice and smooth. Alright, and then I'll use this abrasive pad. I wish I could remember who made this, but I like to use these two together. The bright boy is, much more aggressive, and then this kind of polishes the rail out. I have a button for the turnout right here. I have it wired up. I didn't bother showing you how I wired it. In some of my previous videos, I go over that pretty thoroughly. Alright, so to go over a couple things here. The frogs are, this frog, the number 6 turnout frog we just installed, is powered through the Tortoise machine. So as the Tortoise machine switches, the potential on the frog switches from rail A to rail B. So in this case, now I have my meter on beep. So in this case, when I have a short, meter beeps. Now in this case, the frog is on rail B. So if I put my multimeter lead here and here, it's short because it's on this rail. Now if I switch, the frog is now on this rail. You can see the frog is now on this rail. And here, I put the multimeter here, open, short. I switch back. The frog is now on this rail here. And it's open here. Alright. Now here's the Tortoise wiring for the number 6 turnout that I just put in place. Now these two outside wires are to power the Tortoise machine. The red and black are the DCC bus. The green wire here is to the frog. The blue wire, or the purple wire, is the current regulated DC voltage for the LEDs. The red wires for the red LED, green wire for the green LED. Everything is wired up. Now it is time to test the track. I have this on speed setting 1. So if we have any problems with the track, they're going to show up. We're not going to just fly over the top of some issues. And of importance is the powered frog. So we're going down the diverging route, down the spur track. And we're coming up to the frog now. And you can see it's going right over the top of the frog. Now if the frog was wired incorrectly, we would have shorted out. And would have tripped the breaker for this section of track. But we did a resistance check on the track, so there was no reason to believe anything was wrong. And we've cleared the frog, and so the rest of the spur is just track. All right, I'll set the turnout to the normal route. And we'll test the frog on the normal route. And it's at speed setting 1. We're coming up to the frog. And everything's good. And we're on the frog for the number 4 turnout. So having all the frogs powered is a definite plus. You can see here by adding the Benchwork extension or widening the Benchwork that I still have access to all these things, including the universal panel. The only thing I had to give up was the throttle holder for my DT402, and these days I'm using the wireless throttle, so that's not a real big loss. I think widening the Benchwork is going to be a big plus for the layout. All right, well, I think that'll do it for this video. Got the Benchwork widened. Got the spur track laid in. Got a Tortoise machine installed. Frog's powered. And everything's working like it should. So I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you come back next time.